So my name's Mariam and I work at Just Treatment, and I'll be co-hosting this call with Sophia, a volunteer Just Treatment leader, who you're going to meet really shortly. Welcome again, everyone, to tonight's launch call for the NHS New Deal campaign. It's amazing to see 310 people on the call already from all across the UK, all united in our love for the NHS and our determination to give it the support it needs through this pandemic and make it stronger for the years ahead. We're in the midst of some of the worst days of the pandemic, and we know many of you will have been personally affected. So thank you to all of you here for making space to joining us this evening. Before we get started, just a few bits of housekeeping to run through. Overall, this call should last less than an hour. We promise we're going to do our best and not go over that to respect everyone's time. And if you're joining from a laptop, desktop or tablet, you'll be able to choose either speaker view or gallery view in the top right-hand corner. Speaker view will allow you to see the person who's speaking on a large screen, whereas on gallery view, you'll see everybody on the call in a small square. Speaker view is probably best for the majority of the call. We're going to keep everyone muted because there's so many people on the call and there's a lot to get through. But if you want to ask questions or ask for support, you can write in the chat box. We're going to do our best to respond to any technical questions right away. For questions about the themes and issues of the content that aren't addressed by the speakers, we'll do our best to follow up in an email after the call. We're also recording this call, so if you'd prefer not to be recorded, you're welcome to turn your camera off now. And lastly, if you want to say hi, please type your name and where you're from in the chat box so everyone can see how many people are ready to be part of this massive people-powered campaign. And if you're calling in on a phone, you won't be able to do this, but don't worry, we still know you're here with us. Before we explain what's coming up tonight and introduce our brilliant speakers, I just wanted to start by saying a huge thanks to you all for joining us tonight during what is an extremely difficult time for everyone. The last year has been one of the most worrying, traumatic and uncertain any of us have lived through. The COVID pandemic has taken loved ones from us, struck many of us down with an illness that still lingers, cost us our jobs and brought the economy to its knees. Through it all, the NHS has been there for us. The amazing nurses and doctors and all the other workers putting their lives on the line to care for us under unbelievable pressure. We've all been reminded why we love and need our NHS more than ever. But we also know that those heroes working within the NHS have been repeatedly let down. For years, politicians have mistreated the NHS. They've starved it of funding, put the interests of big corporations before our health. Even now, the government is planning further reforms known as integrated care organisations that will further weaken our NHS and give more power to private companies. And during the pandemic, the NHS has come close to collapse. Too many people are losing their lives and too many people's surgeries or treatments have been cancelled during this crisis. Too many health workers and patients have faced unsafe conditions. We know that the weaknesses undermining the NHS response originate long before 2020. But the COVID crisis has also been a reminder that our health, the health of our families, friends, and communities count above all else. And it's also given us some amazing moments of unity and solidarity, from the explosion of mutual aid groups across the country to the clapping and rainbows in windows. It's clear that millions and millions want to see more funding for our NHS, proper support for our doctors and nurses, better care for patients. And if all of us who love the NHS, who rely on the NHS, take action together, we can make these things a reality. And that's why we're all here tonight. First we clapped, and now we're going to act. Together, we can and will build the brighter and stronger future for the NHS that we all need. We've invited you to join this call because we have a plan for how we can win it, but it's going to take all of us getting involved to make it happen. So before we dive into the plan, I just wanted to give an overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight and the awesome guests we've got joining us on the call. First up, I'll be handing over to co-host Sophia, who is a volunteer leader with Just Treatment. She's going to tell us about where the NHS New Deal came from and what it's calling for. Then we're going to hear from the super inspiring Dr. Sonia Adesara, who will be sharing her experience as an NHS doctor and explaining why now is the moment that all of us need to act. Then I'll be sharing our exciting plan to win for the NHS New Deal campaign and explaining exactly how you can get involved to make it happen. And after that, we'll be joined by the acclaimed children's author and poet, COVID survivor, and let's be honest, all-round legend, Michael Rosen, who's going to be speaking about his experience as a patient and what the NHS means to him and to all of us. Finally, Sophia's going to wrap up by running through the next steps and all the ways you can take action right from the end of this call. And lastly, if you're on social media, please help us spread the word by using the hashtag NHS New Deal. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Just Treatment leader, Sophia, to kick us off.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here with you all this evening. So as Mariam said, my name is Sophia and I became a Just Treatment volunteer last year because, like all of you, I was sick and tired of seeing our NHS mistreated and both patients and health work being let down. So I'm a health and wellbeing worker and I know how important it is for everyone to get proper healthcare. But sadly, every day I see people being denied the care and support they need to deal with health issues. These are often caused by the inequalities we've seen exposed by COVID, including poverty, race, and poor housing. We all have a story to tell about why we want to fight for the NHS. And we believe it is people like you and me standing up for the NHS that can win the change we need. Just Treatment is led by ordinary people who rely on the NHS when they get sick. So I'm going to introduce a few of them now to say why they're involved. And first up, it's Anne. Can you unmute yourself? Do you want me to? Yeah, there you go.
Hi there, I'm Anne. I have breast cancer, which spread to my liver in 2016. Modern drugs have been proven to extend life, such as mine, but so far there is no cure. I became involved with Just Treatment in 2018 on the back of having to crowdfund and campaign for such a drug. In my case, Kadcyla. The price the drug company had put on it was so high that the NHS couldn't afford it. Kadcyla has kept my disease at bay for over 4 years now, but like other drugs, it remains very costly to the NHS. COVID-19 came along at a time when the NHS, which all of us patients depend upon, was already struggling from lack of staffing and underfunding. This is why the NHS New Deal is so important. It is imperative that the NHS, its staff and treatments are allowed to thrive in the future and that the service remains free to all at the point of access. I'm a breast cancer patient. For the last 6 years or more, my life has depended upon NHS care, but I know it hasn't always been optimal through lack of proper investment. That's why I'm fighting for the NHS New Deal.
Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing your story with us. And now we're going to hear from Dinah.
Hi. Well said, Anne. Hi, I'm Dinah. I'm a student at the University of Chester. I first approached the NHS for treatment and diagnosis a couple of years ago. To this day, I'm still on the waiting list for treatment, and I only managed to get a diagnosis of OCD, PTSD and depression through the university system. It's been really hard and demoralising to pluck up the courage to ask for treatment and get rebuffed at every single step, pretty much. I've had issues where I've been passed around various public and private health services and have had to give my story over and over again because my notes haven't been transferred between the different systems. Often there simply haven't been enough CBT therapists in my area, so I've not been able to get the right treatment for my needs. And we shouldn't have to fight for the healthcare that we need. Nobody should. but I've seen firsthand how fragmented and underfunded our healthcare system is and the impact that this has on patients. This experience is why I'm part of Just Treatment and why I'm calling for an NHS New Deal.
Thank you, Dinah, and again to Anne for sharing your powerful stories with us and everyone tonight. I'm sure everyone on this call has a story to tell about why they care so much about the future of the NHS. If you'd like to briefly share why you want to fight for the NHS in the chat, it'd be really lovely to hear from you. So yeah, please post your stories in the chat box right now. For those of you who don't know, since 2017, Just Treatment has been working with patients and their families to pressure the government to put patients before the profits of big pharmaceutical companies. And we've had some big wins, which have meant that cystic fibrosis and breast cancer patients are now able to access crucial treatments that were previously priced too high for the NHS. But it's not just drug companies who are ripping off our NHS and putting patients' lives at risk. And the COVID crisis has really shone a spotlight on this. Decades of privatisation, disorganisation and cuts have left us all, especially our NHS staff, far more vulnerable than we needed to be during this pandemic. But it doesn't have to be this way. We want to see a healthcare system which treats staff and patients with the respect and dignity we deserve. That's why back in May, as the first COVID wave peaked, we set out a plan to build and win a new deal for the NHS. Just Treatment is led by patients, and we believe the future of our NHS should be decided by those whose lives depend on it. So last year, an amazing group of 400 people like you stepped up and had conversations with people affected by COVID in each of the 750 constituencies in the country. We've never done anything like this before, but we were amazed at the response, and it has resulted in the views of over 1,500 people from all corners of the country shaping a set of demands for a new deal for the NHS. We also worked with as many organisations out there doing incredible work on the NHS as possible. The final result of this process is a set of transformative, people-powered demands that have been built from the crowdsourced ideas and experiences of NHS users across the UK. And it's so exciting that today, after months and months of listening and building, the new deal is now live. So the document is available for you to all view. It should be posted on the chat right now. There you go. It should be posted in the chat right now. The NHS was founded on a simple principle: to provide universal public healthcare, free at the point of use, no matter who you are or what your circumstances. This is the principle we're fighting for: an NHS that looks after all of us, no matter who we are. An NHS that is owned by all of us, not by private corporations or distant managers. An NHS that cares for us throughout our lives, not just patching us up when things go wrong. So, what are our core demands, you ask? Okay, first, give everyone an equal chance to enjoy the freedom of a healthy life. All of us, no matter where we live or who we are, should have an equal chance to live a full and healthy life. We must overcome the disadvantages and inequalities that mean some people's circumstances lead to worse health and poorer care. Second, an NHS that listens, run by the people, for the people. This is our NHS. We must give patients and frontline health workers the ability to shape services so that they meet the needs of communities across the UK and give patients the respect and dignity they deserve. Third, tackle the root causes of poor health. Across the UK, bad housing, poorly paid work, pollution and poverty are making us sick. We must do something about these underlying causes. It's not good enough to simply treat people once they're already unwell. Fourth, fully fund our health and care, respect and value NHS staff. If nothing matters more than our health, then why aren't we funding healthcare properly? We must dramatically increase spending to the levels seen in France and Germany. That means an extra £33 billion a year, and ensure that NHS staff get the pay and support that means that they can do their job. And the fifth and final demand, Our care is not a commodity. Stop big corporations ripping off our NHS. Right now, the profits of healthcare and pharmaceutical corporations are being put before our right to health. We must bring an end to private companies running NHS services and take action to protect patients from big pharma and big data firms. This year has shown us that health must come first. This is an ambitious vision for our NHS, which is shaped directly by patients and health workers. We know that if we all get out there and speak to our friends, families, and neighbours about this vision, it will be supported by millions. So that's exactly what we need to do. In a few minutes, Mariam will be running through our plan to win for the NHS New Deal and explaining exactly how you can all get involved. But just before we do that, we're going to hear from someone who's working every day within the NHS, struggling to care for her patients in the midst of this crisis. Sonia Adesara is a doctor working in a London hospital. She's seen firsthand the consequences of a decade of funding cuts on her ability to care for patients. So now, over to you, Sonia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So this time last year, I was working on a night shift and we had a young man come into our resource department. I think he was about 13 years old. He came in with respiratory arrest. So he had asthma. So we started doing CPR. We tried to ventilate him. We started giving him medicines to try and open up his lungs. But we were unable to get him to breathe. So this young man died in our department. So I wanted to mention this firstly because it's important for us to remember that the NHS is the end point. And for many people, for too many people living in our country, their ability to live healthy lives is being hampered by the circumstances that they're born into. So, you know, in the past decade, we've seen a 50% increase in numbers of children being admitted to hospital with breathing problems. And that's because, you know, in areas like mine where I work, we see more children growing up in poverty, in poor housing, you know, poor nutrition, poor air quality. So the polluted air that they breathe in is making them sick. And then I also mention this because, you know, after this happened, because I remember it quite graphically, we couldn't stop, we couldn't cry, we had to just keep working because we had a busy department, it was the middle of winter, we had trolleys lining the corridor, we had a 6-hour wait to see a doctor in our A&E department. So this is the context in which, you know, our NHS went into the pandemic. Now, the past few weeks, you know, it's been all over the news. I'm sure most of you know what it's been like in our hospitals. But you know, every day we are watching patients die. We are, you know, seeing them struggle to breathe, and then we have to just go on to the next patient because there's so many waiting, and that's just becoming the norm. It's I've had a few shifts now where I've had 2, sometimes 3, 4 really, really sick patients, and I've just had 1 ITU bed free. And it's been frightening. It's been really frightening working in a situation where you're constantly on the verge of running out of ventilators and running out of beds. And you know, I really, you know, I welcome the People's COVID inquiry that's being launched this week because, you know, in my opinion, the horrendous death toll that we have experienced was not inevitable, and it also it's not simply, you know, a consequence of the mistakes that have happened over the past year, but it is years and years and years of policy failings by numerous governments. So, as others mentioned, the marketisation of our NHS has led to the situation where NHS services, instead of working together, they have been forced to compete against each other. So, you know, I had the bizarre situation in my hospital where, you know, I remember one day we'd run out of CPAP machines, and yet our hospital couldn't tell the ambulance services to go to other hospitals because they were worried about being fined. We've also seen just relentless, you know, outsourcing of NHS services to the private sector in recent years. And the consequence of this is that care is then seen as a commodity to be profited from. And then as a consequence, we've seen repeated, and I think, you know, I'd say unforgivable failings of care as a consequence of this commodification of care. We've also in past few years, sadly seen the xenophobic policies of the hostile environment become entrenched into our NHS. And that has resulted in charging policies, the infrastructure for charging to become built up within our healthcare service. And has also meant that migrants who are living in our communities are, we know over the past year have died from COVID, have died from childbirth because they simply can't afford to pay for healthcare, or because they're just too scared to go and see the doctor because they're worried about being deported. And finally, the decade of underfunding and the chronic staff shortages in our healthcare service has left NHS workers not just exhausted, but I'd say emotionally drained, because we are constantly struggling and fighting against these pressures to provide the affectionate and the dignified care that we want to give to every single patient. So finally, it doesn't have to be this way, and I believe we need to demand more, and I do believe that we have the power to demand more if we get organised. That we have to and we should demand something better. Demand an NHS that is owned by us and accountable to us, and it has the investment to give world-class and dignified care to every single person that walks through its doors. To demand a country that protects care but also values care work. To demand an economic system that allows and that focuses and centres our well-being, and that protects our environment, so that it gives everyone, every single family in this country, the living conditions, the working conditions, and the environmental conditions to live meaningful and healthy lives. I do believe health justice is achievable. We need to be bold, and we need to get organised, and we need to demand more. We can demand better. But we need you, we need every single person watching this to demand more, and let's demand a new deal for our NHS, and let's demand health justice and healthy lives for all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for that insight into the deeply worrying reality of patient care in our hospitals right now, Sonia. A huge and heartfelt thank you as well to you and all NHS staff, from doctors and nurses to cleaners and porters, for putting your lives on the line for us all during this pandemic. The best possible way we can repay our gratitude is by fighting tooth and nail for better conditions for health workers, and for an NHS which is fully funded and has the proper support it needs. I'm sure all of us here tonight have our own story to tell about the amazing care that NHS workers like Sonia have given us, or a loved one. But many of us will also have stories about the immense strain the NHS is under and the impact that it is having on patient care. These patient stories are one of the most powerful tools we have in convincing people to take action for the NHS, which in turn ramps up the pressure on our politicians to act. Just as a side note, if anyone had a bit of a delay in loading the New Deal demands that we posted in the chat, it's because so many people were trying to read them at the same time. So we're just going to be posting the link again, and hopefully this time it should definitely. Awesome. So time to share what our plan to win is for the NHS New Deal and where all of you come into it. So the reason we're spending time tonight telling you all about the campaign strategy is because it's people like you that will be stepping up to actually make it happen. And if you're going to give time to this, we think it's only fair you know the strategy and that this plan is collectively owned and acted upon by all of us. There's no point having a list of demands without a plan to win them. Forcing politicians to back a new deal for the NHS might seem like a big ask. But if we act right now and follow a smart strategy, together we can do it. Before I dive in, I want to ask you all now to take the next crucial step in winning an NHS New Deal. If you're with us, And if you're ready to get to work, we need to hear from you. We're posting a link right now in the chat box that will take you to a form which says you're willing to step up and organise for an NHS New Deal in your constituency. This localised organising is an absolutely vital part of our plan to win. And I'm going to help and I'm going to explain how. But for now, we're asking you to click the link, fill out this very short survey, fill out the very short form and sign up. And don't worry, we're going to be giving you support and all the support that you need. So why are we asking you to do this? Simply put, we're going to sign up thousands of people across the country who are committed to winning an NHS New Deal, each one helping to get a critical mass of people in their constituency on board so they can leverage their MP and secure their support for the NHS New Deal. Just Treatment is a really small organisation, just 4 part-time members of staff. We've won really big victories in the past through the leadership of NHS patients, but this fight for the future of our NHS is the biggest one we've taken on by far. We and the NHS really need you to get involved. We know that if politicians want to change things, they can. The global response to coronavirus has shown that politicians can do big things, as long as the pressure is there to make them do it. Politicians have the power to properly fund our NHS and safeguard its future. We just need to force them to use that power. We know there is huge support out there for the NHS. During the pandemic, there has been an incredible outpouring of appreciation for the NHS and the doctors and nurses who care for us. Poll after poll echoes the clapping seen on our doorsteps. Huge public support for the NHS and its staff. Every single MP and political party was elected on the promise to support the NHS, and it's our job to turn that support into action. We know that politicians care about votes, and many of them won by tiny margins. In more than 100 seats across the UK, politicians were elected by a few thousand votes or less, and with countless politicians promising better support for our NHS. We can take advantage of these tight margins and their fear of losing the next election. We can hold them to their promises and show that if they don't back an NHS New Deal, they'll lose in the next election. These 3 facts make us powerful and give us leverage. They make politicians across the country vulnerable to pressure from people. Our job is to build pressure and force politicians to act. So how will we do that? Well, here are the 3 core principles of our plan. Number 1, we'll use our NHS stories to bridge the political divide. We all have a reason to love the NHS. A family member who had life-saving treatment, a friend who lives a healthy life thanks to the care of nurses and doctors. These personal stories we have about the NHS are powerful. They persuade people in a way political slogans or stats just can't. We'll use our stories to bridge the political divide, win over people of all parties and force their MPs to listen. We'll use our relationships to move people to action. Trust in the media and online sources is at an all-time low, and we can use this to our advantage. Guess what studies show to be the most trusted source of information? Friends and family. By using our NHS stories, every single one of us has the power to cut through the noise and persuade our friends, family and neighbours to support the NHS New Deal, put pressure on their MP and even join our movement. And number 3, we'll use our people-powered tactics to show the depth of support. History shows that big change happens when large amounts of people come together in a way politicians and the media cannot ignore. We'll use tried and tested tactics to grab media attention, ramp up the pressure on politicians, build the size of our movement, and make sure we win. And if we all act on these core principles, the sky's the limit in terms of growing the power of this campaign. Our target audience for this campaign is anyone and everyone who clapped for the NHS or put a rainbow in their window. We want the millions of people who clap for the NHS to act for the NHS. So the first phase of the campaign will be focused on reaching out to and signing up these people. We'll use our NHS stories, the power of our relationships, and crowd-funded digital advertising to sign up 100,000 people across the country, around 150 people in each constituency. This is a big target, but it's only a fraction of the millions who clap for the NHS. At this scale, politicians will be forced to pay attention. And then, once we've recruited and trained thousands of people who are ready to take action for the NHS, we will translate this into concrete pressure on local MPs to back the NHS New Deal. Rather than putting initial effort into sending an isolated email to your MP, we want you to first build a critical mass in your constituency and get in touch with your MP when you've got the power to really make them listen. And that's why from tomorrow, we're launching local petitions aimed at every single MP, which we can start building right away. And after this, at the point where thousands of NHS supporters like you are actively organising for an NHS New Deal in constituencies across the UK, we'll go national and take the fight to the government and force them to listen. It's an ambitious plan, but it is exactly what is needed right now. This is a decisive moment in history. There's never been a better moment to win transformative change for the future of the NHS. And the work begins right here, right now, in this very call. So we're reposting the link we shared a little earlier in the chat. If you're willing to step up and organise for an NHS New Deal in your constituency, we need to hear from you via this link. But we need to go bigger. This local organising work is what will enable us to build support at a constituency-based level and use this to directly put pressure on individual MPs. From organising friends and family phone banking parties to community letter writing sessions and constituency-wide postering campaigns, there are a number of different activities that we need you to take the lead on organising. And we'll provide you with all the training, resources and support you need. So if you've never done anything like this before, don't worry. In fact, if you've never done something like this before, you're exactly who we want to hear from. We know that if we can recruit the people who clapped because they love the NHS and help them to act in an organised, coordinated and strategic way, together we can win a new deal for the NHS. So once you've filled out the form, we'll get in touch with the next steps, including details of our upcoming organiser training session. It's amazing that we've already had 70 people sign up. So let's keep going. Now we know that not everyone will be able to take on an organising role. And some people will want to find out more about the campaign actions before signing up to organise. So if this is you, don't worry, as there are so many other ways to get involved and contribute towards our plan to win. Very shortly, before we wrap up tonight's call, Sophia will give a quick rundown of all the different ways you can take action right now. But before we do that, I'm honoured and delighted to welcome our final guest speaker tonight. Michael Rosen is an acclaimed children's author and poet and a tireless campaigner for equality and justice. Last year, his life was saved by the NHS after contracting COVID. He's here tonight to tell us all what the NHS means to him and why it's so important that we all take action to fight for its future. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Mariam. I hope you can hear me. Yes, I'm here, in fact, thanks to the NHS. If the NHS wasn't around and didn't exist in this last year, I would probably be dead. It's as crucial and as important as that. I was rushed to hospital because my oxygen uptake was so poor. I was rushed there by my wife because the ambulance service was so hard pressed they couldn't do it. And I was in intensive care. And for those who know, or for those who don't know, intensive care, of course, is as it sounds, that you are in intensive care. You should have one-to-one care by a nurse by the side of your bed at all times, and obviously enough doctors to make sure that you survive, and enough equipment. But of course, as we now know, looking back at this time, which was last March and April, the NHS wasn't ready for a pandemic. Now, maybe some people will think, well, of course, nobody could be ready for a pandemic. Well, in actual fact, the government ran a kind of feasibility study, which they called Exercise Cygnus, only 2 or 3 years before this pandemic came. And this exercise, so-called, found out that in actual fact, the NHS wasn't ready. And what's interesting is that the very same person who is supposedly going to be in charge of this investigation into how the NHS has handled COVID all round, it was Jeremy Hunt, and he was the person who didn't, in actual fact, put into process exercise Cygnus with its recommendations. So there's a perfect example of the awful situation we're in. So while I was in intensive care, this was at the height of the crisis of PPE. I have it because I don't know. I was unconscious. I was in an induced coma. But for example, the PPE came in. Some of it was second-hand. So just think that through. Second-hand PPE. Well, obviously, that is not healthy. That is not right. In actual fact, one package arrived and it was covered in blood. So there we are, dying in the IC unit. In fact, in my IC unit, 40% of us died. So I'm part of the 60% that survived. 40% died. And some of the PPE coming in to protect the NHS staff or us or both was coming in secondhand and with blood on it. So 8 of us in my unit, and this is publicly available knowledge, acquired a secondary infection. I got Klebsiella. So here's an example of how nurses and doctors under pressure, what happens. So there were supposed to be 11 of us in that ICU ward. At times there were 24. So that's over twice as many people were on the ward as should have been. And that means that we were dangerously, cheek by jowl, bed by bed, much, much closer than we should have been. And nurses that should have been 1-to-1 at times got up to 1-to-6. So there's an example, a concrete example of how hard pressed the NHS were last March and April when I was in the IC unit. This is not to take away in any way whatsoever from the incredible care that I received, and I'm still receiving, because I've lost the sight in my left eye, the hearing in my left ear, the feelings in my toes, and various other problems, as you know, from what we now call post-COVID, long COVID, that sort of thing. So COVID has had that effect on me, and I've gone on getting fantastic care from our local NHS hospitals. So, you know, I'm not taking away anything at all. So in fact, the word gratitude or obligation, these are words that don't express how I feel towards the NHS and every one of those people, doctors, nurses, cleaners, people who brought the food, the wonderful physiotherapy and occupational therapy that I received at a rehab hospital afterwards. They taught me how to stand up, how to walk, and gave me exercises and so on. So it's beyond gratitude that I feel. I mean, the word is love. And of course, in return, we should think of the NHS as an organization that loves us. I mean, that's the way it exists. We may not use that word, but when you think I'm a parent, and, you know, when we bring up our children, what do? When they're ill, we rush to them, we care for them, we find medicines for them, we soothe them, we try to get them better. And we do that out of parental love or grandparental love or whatever. Well, this is the treatment we get from the NHS. This is what they did. Those nurses who stood by the side of my bed night after night when I was unconscious kept a patient diary. They wrote down each night what I was doing, what state I was in. And I can read that. It's an incredible document full of care and kindness that I could only relate to the kind of care and kindness that I, as a parent, and many of you listening and watching, have tried to give to your parents, or you received from your parents. And the NHS did that to me. Those nurses who didn't know who I was, and coming from countries all over the world or with backgrounds all over the world, were seeing this old geezer sitting there and giving me that incredible care. I mean, it is just unbelievable. So again, I can hardly express it. And when I do, I get quite emotional just thinking about it. So it goes without question that I support every single one of the demands coming from this campaign, from this New Deal. And I support it 100%. You can just take that as read, because when we talk about the NHS and we say it's ours, in a way that it's sort of, it is ours, of course it is, but in a way it's more than that. You'll hear politicians, they talk about the economy. Well, what is the economy? It's us. It's the people. There is no economy without people. And so when they talk about the economy, in a way that sort of it sort of distracts from the fact that that is us, and we can only be able and capable if we have care, if we are looked after, if when we get accidents, fall over, get ill, you know, people in my family have been ill, of course, as with everybody, and have had to go to hospital, you know, well, that's the economy. So that's what we're fighting for. When we hear politicians say economy, we reply, well, that's us. So we're fighting for us, and that's what's important. And when they say, oh, hang on a minute, we haven't got the money, hold it, hold it, hold it. This is one of the great myths and legends that's been foisted on us right the way through this whole austerity, which of course is in part why we haven't got a good enough NHS, is that you've noticed they've been pulling levers in this last 9 months. They've been pulling levers and finding billions. Well, how do they do this? Well, some people, I notice you'll hear on the television, they'll say, ooh, the borrowing's going up. Well, I'll let you into a secret. Most of it is not borrowing. It's not borrowing from anybody. The government pulls levers. They issue bonds. We know about savings bonds and premium bonds. It's not that much different from that. And do you know who buys them? The Bank of England. So the Bank of England buys the bonds. Well, the Bank of England is us. It is the government. I mean, they've all got different names and they're supposedly independent from this or that. But it's just actually passing. I mean, it's just like passing the things on the computer, just pressing buttons. The government issues the bonds. The Bank of England buys them. The government then has money and goes off and buys whatever it wants to buy, PPP, PPE, or whatever it might be, not enough and not good enough. Well, you know, if they can do that in an emergency, if they can do that, even though they said they couldn't all through austerity, then they can do it for the NHS here and now and in the future, the kind of NHS that we've heard these wonderful speeches from you all before. That's the kind of NHS we're entitled to. Pull the levers. Give us the NHS. We are the people. We are the economy. I support this New Deal 100%.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Michael, and for your powerful words. It's so brilliant to have you here tonight. You're a huge source of inspiration for so many of us, and I'm sure I speak for everyone on the call in wishing you all the best on your ongoing recovery process. Thank you. So listening to Michael speak really brings home the power of our heartfelt and honest stories to move people. Our stories about the NHS are stories about things we treasure the most in the world: our health, our families and our friends. We can't allow the NHS to slip away from us. We have the chance to build something very special from the fire that continues to rage around us. And your stories, your leadership will be vital in seizing that chance. We're almost at the end of tonight's call, so thank you so much for being here. But before we finish, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the key actions that you can take right away as part of our plan to win an NHS New Deal. Firstly, to recap, we urgently need dedicated NHS supporters like you to step up and help organise for an NHS New Deal at a constituency-based level. If you're up for this, please fill out the quick form we've posted in the chat and we'll follow up with more details. And remember, we'll give you all the support you need. We've already had 90 people sign up, which is incredible, but can we get it to 120 before the end of the call? Secondly, if you can't to organise right now, we are running national online campaigning events that are open to anyone and everyone. Our next event is a friends and family calling party happening on Tuesday, the 2nd of February at 8 p.m. So I hope you noted that down on your calendars. In this call, we'll be giving a quick fire training on how to use your own NHS stories to win people over to the campaign, as well as talking through tried and tested methods for reaching out to family and friends to get them on board. We'll be emailing everyone tomorrow with all the upcoming sessions and a link to register, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Finally, our ability to scale up this campaign is going to rely entirely on the donations of thousands of NHS supporters like you. In this first phase of the Plan to Win, we're using digital advertising to try and reach the millions of people who've clapped for the NHS but haven't yet taken action for it. And we need your help. In the past 7 days, over 4,000 people have added their name after seeing one of our ads on Facebook. We're aiming to sign up another 6,000 by the end of the next week. Can you chip in to help us fund more ads? Every £5 will let us reach another 500 people and make our collective voice even stronger. A link to make a donation is being posted in the chat right now. Alongside the 3 core actions, there are a number of other individual things that everyone can do to make the campaign stronger. From sharing content on social media to putting up NHS New Deal posters in your window and sharing your NHS story, we will contact you via email about all this and more in the coming days and weeks. So once again, keep your eye out on your inbox. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the call. In what has been such a tough and emotionally draining period for us all, it fills me with so much hope and energy to see so many people here tonight. This shows how much support and love there is for our NHS across the UK. And it's so exciting to think about how together we can turn this support into concrete pressure on our politicians. First we clapped, but now we must act. Let's get out there and win a new deal for our NHS. Massive thanks to all the organisers of the call, to our fantastic guest speakers, Michael and Sonia, and to all of you joining us and getting involved. Bye everyone, have a great night, stay safe, and excited to see you all very soon.